Welcome to Rich Conversations. Today we're joined all the way from Oslo, Norway, Sindre Kristiansen. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Did I get your name right? How to pronounce it?
You did well, you did. At least the English version of it. Yeah.
What's the Norwegian
uh,
version of it?
the Norwegian version would be Sindre Kristiansen. So it's
Wow.
with the rolling R.
Wow, yeah, I can't do those rolling R's.
Oh no, but it's really fine.
How
Most
many languages
people,
do you speak?
I only speak two. So I only speak
Okay.
Norwegian and English. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, why don't you introduce yourself for listeners?
Yes. Well, my name is Sindre, as I said, Sindre Kristiansen. I live in Oslo, in Norway. I study psychology currently, and I used to work as a photographer and videographer before that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm also adopted from South Korea. So I came to Norway when I was 5 months old, to a Norwegian family, and I had a very standard Norwegian upbringing. Very fortunate.
What does a standard Norwegian upbringing look like?
Standard Norwegian upbringing, I guess. Uh, I would probably refer to privileged and lucky in the sense of, freedom and rights. Uh, had a normal upbringing with friends and the usual worries and ups and downs.
Yeah.
But yeah, but quite worry free in terms of what can happen in the world today. So we
Well,
have like this safe little cozy space corner here in Norway, I think.
yeah, but now you're studying psychology. That'll get you into a messy mind area.
It can, but I also think it's quite interesting.
Oh, it's
I can,
absolutely interesting.
yeah, and it can be quite important, and it's quite a shift from photography, what I'm used to. So it's more like uh, it feels less self-interested almost. It's more
Interesting.
taking interest in other people than just what I would like to express or communicate with photography.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah,
First, I want to
yeah.
dive into Oslo. What's the culture of Oslo like?
Culture in Oslo, Oslo, Norway in general, I think is quite liberal, and so culture in Oslo, we do favor like solidarity, but also quite personal freedom. So
Okay.
I think we have like a reputation, if you can call it that, of being a little bit or appear a little bit standoffish or cold. We don't really interact with strangers that much, so we don't sit down next to strangers on the bus or tram, things like that. It's more respect of privacy,
Okay.
but once we do get to know people, and we're quite warm and friendly, I think.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
don't know if that
that's
answered the
that's
question,
interesting.
but
Yeah. Culture is a very vague term, I would say. But I feel like the characteristics is what I'm most interested in, the people and what kind of values and characteristics they have, which is what you're saying. So they're kind of come across as cold until you get to know them.
I think so. I mean, I remember that like musicians, they always uh, I've seen in interviews when if they talk about Norway, and being on a concert and performing for Norwegians can be quite confusing for them a lot of the times, because most of the times we will just stand and listen, and we're not like so we're not emoting a lot. We take it in, we appreciate it, and we applaud, and then we wait for the next song. But it doesn't mean that we don't like enjoy it. We do quite a lot, but we're quite a funny bunch like that, I think. And so, but in a sense, I think we do value, like I said, personal freedom. I
Mm.
think we like like collectively, I think we are all looking for like safety in our society. Uh, Norway is quite family oriented, so a lot of our efforts and our political agenda and all of that goes very much towards having a good family life,
Okay.
having enough time for family and recreation, things like that.
Yeah, that sounds pretty important. It's a good
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
to value. What how would you describe the difference between Norway and Sweden and other Scandinavian countries in the
Uh,
region?
right. I mean, I think culture-wise we're quite similar.
Uh-huh.
To be honest, like, even though we might not like to admit that, because it is that like friendly rivalry. But when it comes to, I think perhaps, like, without, I'm not going to assume anything because I'm not an expert on either Sweden or Denmark, but I think that Sweden might be a little bit more um, daring and taking chances on more innovative cultural things. Like Sweden has
Mm.
been famous for music and movies, at least compared to Norway. So they might have like an like an advantage right there, that they're more. I don't know if they're willing to take risks is the right term for it, but perhaps uh, more open to the creative part, at least.
So like more creatively ambitious.
I think so. I think so. I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but that's the impression, at least, that I have. But in terms of culture and uh, where their values lie, I think it's quite similar for all Scandinavian countries.
Wow. Huh. I feel like, well, I'll ask you about that in a second. But first, I want to know if you have an open day, how would you choose to spend it?
If I have an open day, I mean, I do have quite a few open days now that I'm a student. But I'm quite a homebody, so I spend a lot of time at home. I do cater to my own like community that I've created through social media, things like that. But if I do go out, I think I like to. Norway has, or at least Oslo has, this great opportunity of combination between city life and nature. So you can
Okay.
take like the subway right to the forest, and you go off on the station, and it's just greenery and lakes and all around, like
Really?
no city. And there is, you can also take a bus to hiking trails that is like right by. So it's a nice mesh between nature and city and convenience. So I think I do like to go out like that. I also like to go to the cinemas a lot, though.
Okay.
And well, currently, like with the situation, I haven't been
Yeah.
able to go out that much.
Yeah.
But
COVID.
yeah, but uh, when possible, also pop by exhibitions. There's usually always some small little art gallery that has something to exhibit, and that's always nice because everything is so small. It's easier to get in contact to talk to them, to artists and people and the curators. So that's always interesting as well.
Wow. Those are some cool stuff. Would you say that
Yeah.
public transportation is pretty accessible in Norway?
Um. Well, in Norway in general, perhaps not. We're still very much of a car country,
Okay.
but and also because the terrain in Norway is so
Yeah.
ragged, and it's a lot of mountains and weird passages. So, but despite that, we do have like train connections to most of the places in Norway. When it comes to Oslo, I think, isn't it like that public transport could always be improved? But
Yeah.
uh,
Suppose.
but I think it's okay. Um but yeah, no, I guess yeah, no, I'm not gonna go too much into it, but I haven't had any major problems with it, at least.
Yeah. In the States, we're very much a car country, unless if you live in one of the like big areas. Like I live in Chicago, and the public transportation, there's so many different options for public transportation. But like you said, like it can always get better. And
Mm.
so we often talk about like European public transportation, and everything's so much more condensed, and like the trains seem a lot faster and more state of the art and
Uh,
smooth.
oh, uh, in Europe, you mean,
Yeah,
or
compared
in?
to the US.
Oh, well, I haven't, and I don't have that much experience with public transport in the US. I've only been to the US a couple of times, but also in the major uh, tourist places.
Which
And
spots are those? New York?
well, New York, LA, and went to Orlando as well.
Okay.
At the
Did you go to the
sci-fi
Universal in Orlando
Universal
or
Studios.
Disney? Yeah.
Yeah. We went there for 4th of July, actually, which was kind of
Recently?
great. No, it's been a while. It was back in, I think it was back in 2004. So it's quite some time
Okay, yeah,
ago.
that's quite some time ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was
Um,
so what kind of movies are you watching when you go to the cinema?
oh, it depends. I mean, I'm very much, because I studied film when I was younger. I'm very much interested in all types. I don't have like a particular favorite genre. I think it depends what's on, whatever piques my interest, and it can be art house movies, but it can also be like major blockbuster movies as well. Sometimes it's nice to just have some escape, I think, from the
Mm,
everyday, and let the mind rest a little bit and just like take everything in.
yeah.
So kind of depends on my mood, I guess,
Yeah.
and also what's available, obviously. But uh, yeah, so lately, the last one I saw was actually uh, a 80s manga movie, Akira, which was like a remastered version, which was set up like for a one-time thing.
Oh,
But
interesting.
yeah, no. So it can be anything really.
Yeah, it seems like you're somebody who really explores their interests. It seems
Yeah,
like you kind of know what you like. Like you're very intentional about what you consume and what you.
yeah. I think I will always at least try to give something a go. Like if there is i- if I'm unfamiliar with something, I do like to try to understand and uh, yeah, explore it. See, just to see if it is something for me or not. And but I do like variety. I don't think I like to be stuck in one place or one genre, so to speak. Not only
Okay.
with like movies, but in things in general. And uh, I think that's also why uh, if I look at my resume, that it appears maybe that I'm like all over the map. But I think it's
Okay.
because there's a lot of different interests that I have,
Yeah.
and if I had the time and opportunity and brain capacity, I would love to, study so many more subjects and have so much more time to just learn, I think.
What are some of those other subjects besides psychology and photography and cinema and art?
Oh, there's a lot of
Those are
there's
like
a
four
lot of
things right there.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of things in science. I think I would like to explore.
Okay.
If I had been a smarter individual, I would probably love to learn more about neuroscience and astrophysics, or physics in general. I think it's fascinating because I don't really understand it that well. So
Yeah.
it's interesting for me. But I also would love to learn more crafting things. Sewing, I think it's quite interesting.
Sewing.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I would love to do something more with my hands as well. Uh, but yeah, there's always something that I find interesting, and but you can't study everything. You have to pick.
I don't know. Some would dare to oppose that, but if someone were spending a day in Oslo, what would you recommend them to do?
If they were to spend a day in Oslo, I think like I said, I would definitely recommend doing some of the nature scenes because you can get quite a nice view of Oslo. But I think, I mean, this is probably not possible for everyone. But if you like know someone from Norway or Oslo, to spend time with them and their friends and hang out like locally, that would be probably the most ideal. But if you want to just take in the city, I would probably advise them to go down to the harbor called Aker Brygge,
Okay.
and just sit in and take in the cultural life, and just see the behavior of the Oslo people. It can be quite relaxing, actually. I do like to go down to the harbor area and just sit and observe, especially if it's like a nice day. But there are other tourist sightseeing things like the Viking Museum and go to the castle, things like that.
There's a castle.
Well, it is technically a palace. I will say the royal palace, but it might not be that it might not be that grand as the ones in the UK and things like that. But we do have it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have Oslo on here, Google Images.
Right.
And the architecture is very fascinating because it's at one point it's very what you think of with Scandinavian architecture, like very minimal and kind of like abstract and like simple and functional, like IKEA in a way. And
yeah.
And at the same time too, there's like it's like colorful and like tight and I don't know, older. Just like
yeah. I think
terrible job of describing it, but
no. I think Oslo has like this weird mix of traditional and modern.
yes,
because we, like before Norway found oil, basically before we became like a oil industry nation, most of our buildings in Oslo came around late 1800s, when after the industrial area, and then we were kind of like a farm country for quite some time. And so from the 70s and 80s, things kind of escalated, and then from 2000s and upwards, new buildings started to pop off like really quickly. And so there's a lot of new architecture, new modern buildings, but we're still not going full skyscraper mode. There's still some regulations. They still want to keep some form of aesthetics of the city. But I do like that it's a little bit of everything, it seems.
Yeah, that's a really cool thing to experience. Like that old charm with kind of new, bold vision.
I'm sorry. I think you dropped out a little bit.
It's interesting with you have like the old charm, but then you have the bold kind of innovative pushing boundaries architecture wise.
Yeah, I think the company that did our opera house also did design for the 9/11 memorial in New York.
Really?
From the Twin Towers. It's called Snøhetta, I think the company was called. And so they have done quite a lot of interesting architecture as well.
Are you into architecture?
I am. I'm not super familiar with it. I do like it, but I'm not like hardcore into the architecture lore, but I was actually to become an architect when I was younger. That was like the goal, or at least my
Really?
dad's goal. Yeah, and but I do like architecture. I do like design and structure, and that's why also photography veered into interior and um, uh, and more buildings rather than people.
Yeah. You're more interested in people
Right now, I am. Yeah,
right now.
sure.
Right now.
But I think you know, like with psychology, I am very fascinated about human behavior and um, yeah, and just how we are and how we interact as humans.
Mhm.
But I do think I like to observe it rather than to be right in the mix. And I think that's also reflective of how I work as a photographer. I do like to observe and just to be a little bit in the background and get like an overview. So I think
Yeah.
that has kind of followed from photography. I was never like a good portrait photographer. Uh,
I'm
I
not honestly, I'm not interested in portrait photography. I your photos stick out to me because you kind of take photos the way I would take photos. And that's just like I just want to get like a symmetrical framing of this space, whatever it may be. With you, it seems like your photos kind of there's like a if it's a square, right? There's like a middle that kind of veers like perspective wise. And
yeah,
it's like all kind of one, not color, but kind of I can tell you're influenced by these like darker colors. And then even in your background right now, you kind of it mirrors kind of your photography on your page.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch quite the last bit. It was dropping out a little bit.
Oh yeah. So like your background right now kind of mirrors kind of the aesthetic of your photography on your page.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I think I do. Well, I did kind of compose this and how I wanted to set up because I use it for streams. But uh, when it comes to photography, I think what I uh, what I kind of go for is the composition just has to feel right for me. You know, like
Yeah.
there is I can walk down. Excuse me. I can walk down a street and something will catch my eye. I'm not really sure what it will be, and can be different things. And sometimes I will try to take photos uh, for um, for quite some time, and it just doesn't work. You know, so some
Hmm.
things is just like um, kind of like a false idea of what can be good. But once you find like the image, I guess Henri Cartier-Bresson, a famous French photographer, who's kind of coined the phrase "the decisive moment,"
Mm.
is like the exact moment you have to take the picture, and if you don't get that, it's kind of gone forever. And it's a little bit like that, but obviously, I don't have like humans in or people um, to take under consideration when it comes to that, which is much more harder when it comes to decisive moments.
Hmm.
But so when I do take pictures of buildings, uh, I will spend quite some time getting the right composition. And I know that I can crop it and skew it and Photoshop it afterwards, but I do prefer to do all the work before I actually take the picture.
Yeah, I'm looking at your photos right now.
Right.
I like them. They're interesting to me.
Well, thank you. Thank you. They are, and many of them are just like, Instagram photos, I will say. Um,
What's the difference
and
between an Instagram photo and like a photography photo?
um, well, you can be a lot more creative, I think, in with Instagram. Um, Instagram is also quite forgiving. You know, like if you
Mm.
you have some mistakes in your image, if you do fine art images or for exhibitions, you know, you usually print them quite large. It has to be good quality of it,
Yeah.
both on the print and the image. So you don't have any room for mistakes when you're going to print large. Instagram, it's quite forgiving because it's small and it's on a
Yeah.
screen. And
People are going to
so
see it for 5 seconds and that's it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so in that sense, I think I'm more daring with Instagram.
Okay.
And but I still have some, I don't know. My Instagram account I think will be very because I remember I went to Instagram when I first started in 2012, I think. It's been 9 years
Yeah.
on Instagram now.
Yeah.
And I remember when it started out that it was 4 images in the width of it. And it changed down to 3. And I remember so many people who based their
Oh.
gallery on 4 with images. And when they
Oh.
changed it to 3, it completely messed their system up. So I wonder if it's going to happen again. My Instagram page is going to have to be revamped.
That was something I was going to say. It seems like you do your photos in threes,
Well,
like a theme of threes in a way.
yeah, it's mainly because that's the width of it. So it
Yeah.
I do try to find like a triptych, like 3 images that will fit together. But very rarely will I take 3 images that are intended for 3 images set together in Instagram. So
Mhm.
many of the 3 that you will see has been taken with years apart.
I noticed that, like this one, you're in France or Nice,
Mhm.
France, right? And then Paris and then Berlin. And it's cool because you're in like a bedroom looking out
Oh,
and you have
right.
like the sky and the buildings of the city. That's cool.
Yeah, so it's so I for a long time I used to like go through all the archives and try to find things that would fit together just aesthetically. Um, but also yeah, it was more of a fun idea because I do like you said, with the buildings and the symmetry and all of that.
Yeah.
Um, so
And
so I
then you
kind of
have
went for
some
that
in
with Instagram.
nature and
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things on
you
my
got a lot of
Instagram.
different yeah, types in here. That one's wild. What is Lustry? Is that a place?
Which one?
It looks like a um
Oh, that is from a cruise liner that goes from Oslo to Kiel in Germany. A friend of mine used to work on this cruise liner and was able to provide me with some free trips now and then. So this is
oh, nice.
looking up on the lights from where the elevators and stuff are. Is kind of like in the middle of the ship. But I just like the lights and the lines of it.
Yeah, the lights and the lines are very striking in them. It
Yeah.
looks almost like something you would see in like like the 1920s of like technology and like lit up.
Oh, right. Yeah. I always find like I thought like there's a huge influence in kind of aesthetics have been neo noir.
Yeah, noir. I was gonna ask
So
if you watch like film noir.
yeah, I did. I mean, not tons of it, but I do like the aesthetic of it. And neo noir in terms of like Blade Runner and from that late 70s, early 80s era. It's been quite striking to me. And also I think if not the movies, at least the aesthetic style of 80s James Cameron with the blue and black tones. It's been
Okay.
like a big influence. I do like a cold color temperature to my images. As you can see, most of them are quite blue.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really interesting. Yeah, so for those listening, Sindre.Kristiansen is the Instagram handle. You can see some cool photos.
Thank you.
What first, you mentioned a little bit about what got you interested in psychology to study it. Were there any books that influenced you?
Well, I think my interest in photography just came through observation in everyday life. It wasn't so much from literature. I think that came afterwards, when you first start to study it. But I think after I did photography for quite some years, it felt to me, well, I fell sick, so I had to change careers. I was kind of like forced into it because I had to travel a lot for photography. And so I needed to find like a new career, and it felt to me that photography was such it felt very much like this is an outward from me kind of expression or way of communicating.
Yeah.
It was very one directional. And because of that, I felt that it was almost, I'm not saying that photography as a trade or photographers in general are like this, but at least for me, it felt very self-serving in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think as I grew older, the change into interest and well-being in other people took precedence over that. And I felt psychology was part of just to get to learn more about people, but also perhaps by chance or if possible to at least help someone. And I felt that was more important at that moment.
What are some concepts in psychology that really strike you?
Perception, I think. Perception based on both introspection, but also perception of how we view the world and other people in general, and how widely different it can be depending on the individual and their background and experience and the way they are thinking, the genetics of how our mind is put together. There's a lot of difference in the way we perceive and observe and act in the world. And I think a lot of it is, well, it's interesting, but it's also potential trap for miscommunication.
Yeah.
And so I think when it comes to that, perception and communication is probably what I find the most interesting with psychology. There's tons of different interesting fields in psychology, but that's at least what where my core lies at, I think, communication.
So do you think the world would kind of be better off, or even like our own communities, right? As big or small as they may be, the importance of taking a step back and understanding that these are just my perceptions of the world. They aren't necessarily reality. And I have to be considerate that other people have different perceptions and views, right?
Yeah, well, I think tolerance and the understanding that I think from an early age, we tend to view and regard the world from our own perspective, and solely and purely from that. And we can learn about other people, but we'll still filter it through our own moral compass, our own perception again of what's right and wrong. What would I like? Like people can do what they want, but as long as they don't like hurt other people and things, it goes through your filters, so to speak. But to really kind of understand the diversity and the complexity of human beings. I think that capability of understanding, or at least, understanding that we do perceive the world, or can perceive the world quite differently, and concepts in general, what's right and wrong. And so sorry, I lost my thread.
So how do you get more people to understand that we're all kind of filtering the world through our own,
I think
filter in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have like a great solution to shape the world. I would try my best to make sure that I communicate what I want as precise and correctly as I can. I do like to turn every stone and to find every angle. I'm not always able to do that, but to the best of my ability, that's what I'm aiming for, at least. And if I can do that, and perhaps influence like some other people, then that's kind of like a little a step in the right direction, perhaps. I do think there's a lot of things to be improved when it comes to educational systems, in terms of philosophy and psychology, and the ways we think, and how we think, and what we're used to, and how we are used to, or the norm for how we are supposed to think. And I think it's easy to introduce psychology on a basic level of raising awareness, of self-awareness and others' awareness from quite an early age, without it being imposed as some indoctrination of something weird. And and so I think psychology, even philosophy, should be part of a curriculum from an early age.
What kind of philosophy? Do you have any examples?
I think not to impose a specific moral philosophy, but the ability that there are moral philosophies, and that by now there are several different ones. Just to have all the information spread out from an early age, from children, because I think kids are quite perceptive. They're quite smart, and probably a lot more than we give them credit for. So I think if you implement that in a wise and clever and non-intrusive way, it might help a little bit, but who knows?
Yeah. What's the education system like in Norway?
Well, we do have a standard European thing with universal or free education. So we do start like with everyone, like the primary education. It's I think it's fairly normal, I would say.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if it's how different it is from American systems.
I'm not sure if it's that much different. Go through primary and then middle school and high school, and then it's college. To put just the stepping stones of it. But
is
in terms
college
of
paid for in Norway?
Yeah, it's free, but you can also go to private schools if you want to. But they're still far cheaper than in the States. And it's kind of more common to go to universities like state universities, which are kind of also regarded as better universities than the private ones, and harder to get into as well. So but the educational system like that, in terms of that everyone has the opportunity to do whatever they want, is quite it's a good they have a good offer here.
So I feel like Scandinavian countries are like the few countries that do that, paid for secondary education, or is that Europe too?
I think it's Europe in general.
Okay.
Europe in general has free education for the most part, but I guess there are other countries that have probably more lucrative private schools as well. But um, as a general rule of thumb, education is free. And I mean, in Norway, it is. I say it is free, but like you have to pay for books and stuff yourself.
Yeah, but like, okay.
But you get like student loans, which you are entitled to have no matter your background and everything like that. As long as you get into the school,
Uh-huh.
you can have a student loan, and you can get um, I think it's up to 8 years that they will
Okay.
provide tuition fees if you're going to a private school. But if you're going to a state university, it doesn't cost you anything. But sometimes people take student loans just to have money to like pocket money,
Yeah,
to live.
that's interesting because the college experience in America seems much different than in Europe.
Oh yeah,
There's a lot of discussion about it over here about like student loan debt and just what are people actually going to school for?
right.
Interesting conversation.
I
The
think so
American culture
too.
is interesting over here.
I think so too. I think we could have like a whole another type of conversation about
Yeah.
that. And because I'm also like highly fascinated about America, not only the educational system, but America and culture in general. So, and it's quite on display, so to speak. It's one of the things America has been really good at, for better or worse, is marketing.
Yeah.
And
Marketing
uh,
culture, right?
right, exactly. So it's kind of like in everyone's on everyone's minds and in everyone's face. So you kind of like at one point have to take a stand on it, or uh, you don't have to, um, but yeah, I think a lot of people will have some um, opinions about it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are more and more voicing their opinions, not necessarily like on social media, but just like in conversations, like private conversations.
Right.
To me, that's more fascinating than like people posting stuff on social media about it. Because there's a lot more depth, I feel like, with private conversations about some of this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think. But also, I think when it comes to yeah, I think we are very curious about what happens around us, and
Yeah, like
especially,
what happens next.
yeah, but also it's so um, we are being flooded with so much information these days that it's it seems that people yearn for a little pauses and breaks in the everyday
Yeah.
now, more so than we used to.
How do you go about? So you're studying psychology, and you're probably aware of the impact that, say, social media or all this information has. How do you go about navigating your own life, and being intentional about what you consume?
Oh, I think I fall into a lot of social media traps like any other individual. Um, but I think I was probably um, uh, more outspoken on, not in terms of like politics and things like that, but
Uh,
ideas and my own thoughts. I think I wrote a lot more um, a few years back than I do now.
okay.
Um, but in terms of, I mean, when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of news that I consumed in
Okay.
general. But I do like to read. I think I have, at that point, I had like 15 different news sources to
Okay.
compare, because news in general is also quite fascinating when it comes to psychology as well. And as you say, and how much it kind of controls our perception
Yeah.
of the world. Um, and so, yeah, maybe to go back on what's important or what I find interesting with psychology is also critical thinking. I think this is also probably something we should explore more. Not to be overly cynical in our
Yeah.
critical thinking, but critical enough to understand that, like I said, with perception can differ. And
Yeah. Elaborate more on critical thinking. Like when you say critical thinking, what are you imagining?
I think when it comes to critical thinking, not just in terms of what you encounter of information that is given to you, but also critical thinking and how you yourself process that information. So, meaning that if I read something that either upsets me or cheers me on because it kind of confirms what I always thought or believed or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
I think the critical thinking comes partly in the fact that I might be wrong, and I think that's kind of what drives me, is that um, I don't like to be bombastic and very firm and resolute in everything that I say. I
Yeah.
think there's always chance for that I'm either wrong, or the either the values or uh, how I view the world now will change. And I kind of like that progress as well. It means growth. So critical thinking is just that take everything a little bit with a grain of salt, but yeah, or at least be patient enough to find out more about
Yeah.
something. If you firmly believe something like 100%, then challenge it.
Yeah.
You know,
That's a good mode of thought, like, or a good test for oneself is like trying to think
yeah, it
about.
doesn't mean you have to change your mind on it,
Yeah.
but at least to, if it's such a conviction that you don't see any other possibilities that you might be wrong, I some alarm bells will go off for me at least then.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. That can be humbling. That's
yeah,
humility is such a good thing
yeah.
for a
That's
person.
a good word for it, because I think like if I have the exact same views on life and values um, in like 20, 30 years, I think I would have done something wrong,
Yeah.
because it's not to say that my values are gonna today are necessarily wrong or heinous or mean or anything like that.
Mhm.
But as we evolve, I mean, history has shown us that standards and norms that was only like 20, 30 years ago is quite different than it is today.
Yeah.
And at that time, we felt like, well, this is the right way of living. This is the
Yeah.
right way of we are being good and wholesome and empathetic people. And then, and more things were uncovered, and more subgroups came forth, and it was like, okay, we're maybe not as inclusive as we thought we were.
Yeah.
And so, I think realizing that is crucial to keep going, to constantly make life better for not just yourself, but
Mhm.
as many people as possible.
Yeah. It reminds me of this. One of my favorite books is But What If We're Wrong by Chuck Klosterman. And
Oh,
he looks at this idea of looking at the present as if it were the past. Because we, in the moment, in the present, we think we're kind of arrogant in like how much we think we know. But then if we look, it's like if we put ourselves in the future, what are we going to be thinking about right
yeah,
now? You know?
yeah,
It's so
exactly. I think
interesting.
that's spot on. What I mean is that um, there's always, like I said, there's always room for improvement. Doesn't mean that we are um, we shouldn't be content with anything in the present. There's tons of things that we should be happy and grateful for. But at the same time, we can always push for more because there's still suffering. There's still people who are having really hard times. And so there's still work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. What's something you're curious about recently?
I think that I'm always curious to at least a certain extent, but to go in a very, very maybe not so interesting path is that I've always been interested in cooking. I like food, and I like exploring different cuisines. So things that I've been curious about lately is probably Korea, actually, where I came from. Because my entire life, I grew up as a Norwegian. I am probably like a stereotype Norwegian when it comes to my mindset.
Yeah.
I had a very Norwegian upbringing. And even though my parents were quite open about the adoption and all of that, I didn't take that much interest in it because I'm not really sure exactly why, but some of it might be a protection thing, or that you want to shape your identity to not be as different, and that you want to fit in and with your Norwegian life, things like that. So maybe that's why I distanced myself a little bit from it when I was younger. But recently, I think both with Korean culture and cuisine and stuff has been interesting to me. I've been curious to learn more about it.
So are you cooking then? Are you trying the stuff out?
Or just
eating it. Come to where eating it.
No, I do cook, and I love to cook. And so been trying to find like the right ingredients and all of that. But I have a very good friend who knows Korean, who also speaks the language and knows the culture, and have been living in Seoul for quite some time. So I've gotten a lot of insight from that, and it kind of piqued my interest more on it as well. Okay. And also, I feel like Korea has had a certain, how should I say, presence lately.
In your life?
In terms of, no, I think in the world in general with, well, I think like K-pop and K-dramas have been, again, like one of the things that America has been really good at, pushing pop culture and showing, if not maybe entirely accurate, at least part of the culture. And I think Korea has gone in that direction, it seems. Like they promote a lot of Korean culture and heritage through movies, television, and music.
Yeah, it's something I'm curious about is Seoul. It seems like kind of like you're saying, like it's just seems like I stumbled across, I sometimes go on these Wikipedia rabbit holes. So I'll set aside, like, I used to do this, I should get back to doing it. Set aside like 40 minutes, and then I just go on Wikipedia and then just see what I find for like 40 minutes. And one time I came across this global cities index, and Seoul is like very high up on the global cities index. And so the global city index is basically like this it's like this list of cities and this kind of ranking based on like 30 different factors, like economics, art, culture, diversity, all these things. And Seoul is like right up there. It's really interesting.
It's having quite like a revolutionary change, I think, in Korea the last probably 15 15 years, or maybe even more. It's been quite a modernization, it seems,
Yeah.
from traditional ways. But then again, I'm not an expert on Korea, so I shouldn't be assuming things. But it seems to be, at least in Seoul and the greater cities, that there's the change for modernization, more liberal rights, things like that.
Have you been to Seoul?
I have not. I'm not, but I want to go at one point. But I think I want to go for a longer period. I'm going to plan it a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, my camera sometimes goes out like that. We're back.
I see. Yeah.
Where have you all traveled to? Are there places besides Korea you'd like to travel to?
I think I always want to travel. Like it's such a privilege to be able to travel. I try to be a little bit more environmental conscious about travel, but so when I worked as a photographer, I lived in Berlin, and I also lived in Vienna in Austria, and it was quite a lot easier to get around with buses and trains when you're in Central Europe. But when you live in Norway, most of the times you have to fly, take a plane. But I think one of the most interesting places that I've been to was probably in Cuba.
Really?
We went there when I studied photography. So it was part of like a school trip. And so we interacted with a Cuban school and their students. And so we had like a photography project with them. And we kind of got to learn a lot about this. And then this was before it was kind of like open for the US again. So because this was back in 2010, I think. And so that was quite interesting to learn more about it, because I didn't really know that much about Cuba. And so that was fascinating on multiple levels, just to learn about it and also see the culture, not just like the political
like the everyday life of people.
Yeah, exactly. And how different that was compared to your perception again of because of the government and what you are fed by with news and all of that. So it was quite different. So that was interesting. I also found it super interesting to travel to Tokyo in Japan.
Oh, what's Tokyo like?
Tokyo is mad. I mean, in a good way.
Yeah.
It's, first of all, it's massive. Like, I know in America has like tons of big cities. You live in a huge one yourself. Tokyo is
Tokyo's different though.
It's a different type of beast, but highly structured and ordered. So it's more it was it's probably one of the cleanest city I've seen, in terms of it was fascinating. The culture is fascinating. I would love to go back, and I haven't. I was there a long time ago. I was back in 2007 or 8. It's a long time ago. I would love to return. I think other places that I haven't been to yet would probably be. I would love to go to Peru. And Galapagos Islands, I think, would be interesting. And even though it's quite close, I would love to go back to Greece, actually.
Greece, nice.
Yeah. Just for like a relaxing vacation, not so much cultural input. Just to go to Santorini or something, just to chill out and feel life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, before we wrap up here, can you tell me more about your streaming?
Oh, Well, yeah, well, again, yeah, it's so I stream on Twitch. I started streaming on Twitch in June this year.
Okay.
So I haven't been streaming long, but I I think I wanted to do YouTube for quite some time. And
Okay.
I tried to film myself, but I just couldn't stand my own voice. I couldn't, everything that I said, when I was gonna edit, it was like,
Stupid me.
yeah, this is terrible. This is awful. And there were so many ums and ahs, and yeah, I
Yeah.
just couldn't stand it. And so all props to everyone who can do that. So, and then I went on Twitch. I've been on Twitch for about a year and a half, just as a viewer and
Okay.
interacting with certain smaller streamer communities. And I wasn't planning on streaming at all. I think the thought came to me when a friend of mine, the one who taught me about Korea as well,
Mhm.
said, you should stream. And I said, well, I don't really do games. I don't play games. So I do play some games, but I'm not good at them. So I didn't
Mhm.
want to stream games. But now that Twitch has like this just chatting category,
Okay.
I felt like maybe I could do more podcast-ish type streams, talk about certain topics that I would want to talk about, with maybe a psychology or angle on it.
Okay.
Um, and so that's kind of what I wanted to do, to create some form of little or a small community where we can have like a little safe haven where we can
Yeah.
talk about everything. And even though my intentions were to talk a lot more about psychology, it turned into just a nice, cozy place we just hang out, everyone as
Yeah.
friends, and have a good time. So I do stream twice a week, and uh, and even though it's not a career goal for me, it's more like a hobby or an interest.
Yeah.
Um, I think that also takes a little bit of the pressure off it as well for me.
Yeah.
I'm able to just relax and have a good time. So, so yeah, and I think this is also maybe what I'm curious about as a recent time is um, is that form of dynamic and interaction as well, because that was completely new to me, and how different it was to be just a viewer compared to being a streamer,
Okay.
and how you interact with people. I think that was also fascinating. I think it's something that is quite stigmatized today, because when you think of streaming, you already have concepts in your mind. And if you don't, and you're being explained that, well, people do play games and people watch them and interact, it's like, well, that sounds weird. Why would you want to watch that? And I think this is, a lot of the things with gaming in general. Now that, not that I do gaming, but with Twitch, is that when you hear that, well, why would you want to watch people play games? Why don't you play them yourself? And it's, well, people
It's
do
not
that
about the
too, but
game, is it?
it's like community, but also the fact that people watch sports events on TV all the time. You can also
Yeah.
go out to play football, but
Yeah.
you choose to be entertained. I think that's the same concept of it. Uh, yeah, there's entertainment, but also um, the social aspect of it. You can
Yeah.
find your community. You can find people that uh, yeah, you can find friendship basically, and you don't necessarily feel alone so much if you hang out there.
Yeah. That's probably the most important thing about it is like in the world, the more people feeling less alone is a good thing.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I think that's also going to be more um, of an issue as we dive further into the online life,
Hmm.
of feeling that solitude and loneliness. And I
Hmm.
think also we got like a huge taste of it from the lockdown.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
It will be fascinating. It will be fascinating.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. It's been very, very enjoyable for me too. And thank you for having me.
Yes. And remind people again where they can find you and follow you.
Well, on Instagram, they can follow, like you said, Sindre.Kristiansen. It's really hard to spell, so but and my Twitch channel is the same, but instead of the dot, it's an underscore. Sindre_Kristiansen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Thank you. Thank you.